tonight on Southern Newsweek. The title of World's Steepest Street may be taken away from Dunedin's Baldwin Street. Electric scooters have launched in Dunedin. And a crested penguin seen hopping near St Clair Beach has been rescued. A survey of the winding Welsh Street challenging Dunedin's Baldwin Street for the title of the world's steepest is complete, but the methods used may be less than ideal. Dunedin's claim to be the home of the world's steepest street has been officially challenged by residents of the Welsh town of Harlech, who believe their street is steeper.
It's officially known as the world's steepest street and a popular attraction for tourists, but Dunedin's Baldwin Street is being challenged by residents of the Welsh town of Harlech, who believe their street, Ford Pen Lek, is steeper. And at least one local resident isn't thrilled with the idea of being knocked off top spot.
I've been really disappointed. It just adds a really fun element to living here, and it's really positive, and like I said, most people are in really good spirits, and it's just cool.
At its steepest, Baldwin Street's world record gradient stands at 35%, but the Harlech residents claim their street has a gradient of 36%. The Welsh Street has already been surveyed. The information set to be given to a mathematician who'll collate the data before giving it to Guinness World Records. But tourists say whatever the result, Baldwin Street is still a challenge to climb.
It was really crazy. It's the deepest street in the world, and it's heavy to go up there.
And while the Welsh Challenge is providing some welcome international media coverage, living on Baldwin Street has its share of ups and downs.
There's just, I think, sometimes just, again, they struggle with people lying in the road or climbing into their property to take photos and stuff. But generally, most of the tourists are really, really kind and sweet.
It'll take at least 3 months for Guinness World Records to consider the Welsh Challenge. Until then, Baldwin Street will remain the world's steepest. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Thousands of kilometres have been clocked up on Dunedin's roads, footpaths and cycle lanes on Lime scooters since they were launched just over a week ago. Although they've taken Dunedin by storm, they're already generating police complaints, and there's been at least one visit to the emergency department.
An increasingly familiar sight on Dunedin streets in the last few days. Lime scooters launched in Dunedin last Thursday, with local riders clocking up a total of nearly 6,000 kilometres on day one alone. Since then, the city's been abuzz with smiling riders zipping around on the electric scooters as Dunedin joins Auckland, Christchurch and Hutt City as hosts of the Californian company's New Zealand fleet.
It provides a really efficient, affordable, clean alternative, something that's really fun to get around the city as well. And it really aligns well, as you've seen from the results in some of our New Zealand cities, with New Zealand cities, because we have a heavy reliance on private vehicles.
Popular routes so far include the cycle lanes along the one-way system and along Otago Harbour. A fleet of 300 e-scooters are currently operating in the city, although that number could change depending on the demand.
It's more a viability, feasibility type thing, and we'll look to scale up and down as appropriate.
The company signed a memorandum of understanding with the Dunedin City Council. They've received about 35 queries relating to Lime scooters, while Dunedin's tertiary institutions are also preparing for crowds of students and staff members using the scooters.
I think the student population's got a lot better behaved over the years. You know, back in the day when I was there, there may have been a couple of issues like that, but I really like to empower the students actually to behave and use the right discretion.
The Lime scooters are classified as a low-powered vehicle that doesn't require a licence and can be ridden on the footpath, road, shared pathways and some cycle lanes. In Dunedin, the South Today. A Wanaka woodworker has joined Cromwell's Hullabaloo Art Collective with plans for a solo exhibition later in the year. Simon King's wooden artworks include kitchen utensils and food bowls which draw on a Pacific Island influence.
With a background in education and a love of history, artist Simon King crafts pieces that combine traditional techniques with thoughtful experimentation.
One of the areas that I'd like to explore is the Pacific Island traditions of joinery, where there's no such thing as glue and nails, and so everything's lashed together.
Time spent living and working in the Cook Islands has been a particular influence on his work.
And I lived in the Cook Islands for 2 years, teaching over there, and spent a lot of time drawing and painting canoes and buildings and the kinds of traditional joinery techniques there. I'm interested in the form of pottery from different parts of the world and how that sort of influenced what people's expectations of a vessel are. And I'm interested in wood as a material, in sort of exploring colour and texture and putting different woods together through inlay work and so on.
Some of his works feature unusual elements for people to discover.
Inside the lids, when you open them, is something of a surprise in the form of inlay work. And often I use silver and black pearl shell and other materials like that. So this box is an homage to Gretchen Albrecht. So this is based on her abstract works, and I'm a huge fan of some of New Zealand's abstract painters, and so their ideas find their way into my work.
An exhibition of his work will take place later this year at Hullabaloo Art Space in the Cromwell Heritage Precinct. Simon Henderson for the South Today.
An injured Fiordland crested penguin caught hopping along the rocks off the Dunedin coast is now in safe hands. The Department of Conservation was called by members of the public concerned for the safety of the penguin on a rock wall below the St Clair hot salt water pool.
Off to the vet after members of the public called DOC to report a penguin near Dunedin's hot salt water pool. This Fiordland crested penguin had suffered a minor injury worthy of a veterinary checkup.
Yeah, so we're always a little bit concerned when we come across any penguin in a really public area, particularly coming into the molting season. They need to survive anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks on land, changing their feathers for new ones. And if they're in highly stressed, highly public areas, then they're not likely to survive that month of starvation.
Reid says the people who called in about the penguin did exactly the right thing, as both injured and molting penguins can be very vulnerable if they're resting in busy areas.
The interesting factor with this guy was that he also had a superficial wound on his abdomen, so we've taken him to the Wildlife Hospital for a checkup, and then if everything's okay, he'll go off to our rehab on the Otago Peninsula Penguin Place.
She's encouraging the public to keep reporting any penguins that appear distressed or seem vulnerable in public places, and to take some snaps of the bird as well.
If they can get some photos, that's often really helpful because we can start to identify the species of penguin and whether there might be any injuries or if they're severely underweight or anything like that.
Fiordland crested penguins are classified as being vulnerable to extinction, with only a few thousand breeding pairs existing and their population in decline. In Dunedin for the South Today.
Still to come on Southern Newsweek. A forest on the Otago Peninsula has become a birthing zone for sea lions. A pottery chicken travels around the world, while a central Otago chook crossed the road and went walkabout. Welcome back. A forest on the Otago Peninsula is proving a popular spot for sea lion birthings. Pup numbers have been steadily increasing over the past few years for a species that was virtually wiped out a few hundred years ago.
A sea lion pup wriggling around this forest on the Otago Peninsula, just one new arrival in a continually rising population. Its mother Gail has been resting and playing with her offspring surrounded by pines since giving birth in mid-December.
Gail, as a 4-year-old, had her pup last year right out in the open Papanui Inlet, so it's nice to see that this year she's found somewhere a little bit more discreet.
A nearby property owner says Gail was found by a member of his family who heard the loud noises she made while giving birth. He doesn't want to reveal the location, but says the private forest has only become a popular breeding ground in recent years. Jim Fife says the pup numbers are slowly but surely increasing.
In the last few years, the pup numbers have started to increase. Last 4 years it's gone from 8 to 11 to 12 to 15, and so we're expecting 15 or 16 this year.
He says it's a good sign the population is recovering, as the species could have easily become extinct.
It really is good to see an endemic species that is threatened actually increasing in numbers, and really special.
The animals develop preferred times and locations to give birth. This peninsula forest in the new year clearly ticking all the boxes. In Dunedin, the South Today.
A Dunedin potter visited the United States to take part in a ceramics course and returned with more than she bargained for. Marion Familton attended a week-long workshop last June and added a large piece of pottery to her carry-on luggage when she returned.
We've heard tales of chickens crossing the road, but what about a ceramic rooster who's travelled halfway around the world? Dunedin artist Marion Familton went to America last year for a course in clay work run by ceramic artist Julia Galloway.
And she was fantastic. She's a renowned potter herself in functional wear, and but she got us all to sculpt a chicken from life.
She's one of the resident artists at the Stewart Street Pottery Collective, and says while she was a bit surprised at the task, it was an interesting challenge.
So she wheeled in a tea trolley and had a blanket and whipped off the blanket to reveal a roomy cage with this little chicken, strutting around inside.
As a graduate of the art school in Dunedin, she's used to life-drawing human beings, but admits this experience was different.
We got to sculpt from life. So I had gone to art school doing life drawing, doing human form, and this time we got to do chickens. And her great thing was she said, "I don't care what anyone says, no one ever makes a dud chicken."
Marion Familton says she's likely to continue sculpting and creating with clay, but says there'll be no more giant chickens. In Dunedin, the South Today.
It's a tale of intrigue and escape. Two plucky chickens making a run for it in Clyde, calling in at the petrol station and popping into the pub. Their escape has made them an internet sensation, and the jokes on Facebook keep coming.
Retracing the steps that seen Clucky the chicken become an internet hit and the talk of Clyde. Clucky and her sidekick Nugget belong to the Love family, who were on holiday when the chickens went roaming, and they're still learning details of their chickens' summer adventures.
This is where the chicken first trip was, to the petrol station, and then over there the chicken went to the pub.
A neighbour returned the chickens to the Love property, but not before the escape became the butt of a few jokes.
At the pub, they ripped chicken tenders up on the board.
The chickens had escaped once previously when the gate was left open last year, but this summer they ventured a lot further.
We just heard from the neighbours and general public and social media, and basically anyone that was through Clyde the following week, their chickens have been at large around the local community.
The renegade chickens are oblivious to having become the talk of the town.
They rescued it, put it on social media, and thanks to all the local residents who answered back, it went viral.
And the renegade chickens are oblivious to having become the talk of the town.
I think it's taken the chicken crossing the road joke to a whole new level.
In Clyde, the South Today.
An unusual zoological window display at a Dunedin auction house is causing a bit of a stir. Proctor Auction on George Street is displaying an assortment of exotic taxidermied animals in its front window before an auction later this year.
An impressive assortment of taxidermied animals from a private collection currently taking up residence at Proctor's Auctions in Dunedin. The collection includes a lion, a moose, a baboon and dozens of mounted deer heads. Since going up in the shop's front window, the displays captured the attention of the passing public.
Oh, it's been amazing. It really has, like people bringing their kids back and that sort of thing, just to have a look, because you never see anything like this.
Proctor says all the animals had been shot in the 1960s by a Queenstown big game collector and were part of an exhibit in Queenstown called Wildlife World.
It was kept in a collection and you could pay to go and see it originally, but that was about 10 years ago.
There's already been interest in some of the animals from local collectors. Proctor hopes most of the pieces will stay in Otago, although they will need a bit of TLC.
But being shot that long ago, at least they're out there for people to look at.
He says it's difficult to put an estimate on how much the collection might sell for, but some of the bigger animals could fetch between $5,000 and $10,000 when they go under the hammer in early March. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Still to come on Southern Newsweek. A Dunedin nursery owner has helped the council find a solution to unwanted hay bales after last year's floods. And we meet a man trying to preserve Southern film archives. Welcome back. Baleage swept along by November's flood and strewn over a rural road for months is being turned into compost. The baleage had been on Riverside Road near Allenton on the outskirts of Dunedin for about 2 months. But the efforts of one local man has meant a win-win situation for the Dunedin City Council, local farmers and the man himself.
Trees of the World nursery owner Rodney Hogg transporting baleage from local farms, which was rendered useless after last November's floods.
The water lay there for far too long, so the grass has all been damaged, and the bales were floating everywhere. And as I said to you before, like it was 2.5 metres deep.
He says fortunately for him, his farm is on high ground, and he felt sorry for the landowners in the area who were affected by the flood. The baleage lay strewn over a rural road near Allenton for months, so he decided to do something about it.
And they've lost hundreds of bales, so if I can help by shifting them and use them for some compost, it helps everybody.
After a few weeks of negotiations and health and safety concerns raised with the Dunedin City Council, staff agreed contractors would close the road so he could clear it and keep the baleage for compost.
It's been a matter of clearing the road as well, because that's been quite dangerous, all that baleage sitting on the road. They ended up in the ditches and everything, and they cleaned all the ditches out and took them out and set them on the road. And they've been on the road for months, so it's been quite dangerous.
Hogg says the bales would have cost more than $100 each to make. So far he's retrieved more than 100.
There was 33 on Riverside Road, but then there was a whole lot in amongst the trees that all got tangled up in the trees and everything. So we've probably got another 40 there, and then we've got 2 different farmers that have got 40 or 50 that want them cleared.
He says he's got about 9,000 trees at his nursery, and the baleage is a welcome addition to his compost recipe in Allenton, the South today.
The Central Otago Racing Club has vowed to keep fighting hard to keep its annual Omakau Thoroughbred racing. The club is one of those earmarked for closure following a report last year which recommends 7 tracks in the south should no longer hold Gallops race meetings.
Tanya Yonker riding her winning horse past the finish line at the Omakau Races annual January meeting, but it may well be the last meeting for the Central Otago Race Club following a review last year of the New Zealand racing industry's governance structures by Australian Administrator John Massara. He says while the all-weather harness track should remain for trotting events, the grass thoroughbred track should be one of 7 in the Lower South Island to be shut down. Club President Tony Lepper says their return next new year will depend on what Racing Minister Winston Peters decides once he reads the follow-up reports.
He's due to get a report back in February or March, and that's about the same time as they set the calendar for next year. So we're planning on racing next year, but Winston may have different ideas, but we're planning to carry on.
The previous day at Omakau saw harness racing attract a crowd of around 7,000, but while the Gallops attract only around 1,000 visitors, Lepper's still upbeat about the day.
It's so popular, these Christmas race meetings in the provinces, especially in Central Otago, and we've got fantastic fields today, 8 races, over 100 horses, so the trainers are supporting us, the crowd's going to come out, and we're going to have a fantastic day.
He says meetings such as this are a chance to bring new blood into the sport of thoroughbred gallops.
A lot of locals are involved in the ownership of racehorses, and for a lot of people, coming to the races at summertime in Central Otago is their one and only experience at the races. And if you want to get people hooked and interested in our sport, which I think is a fantastic sport, then this is one place where we get them interested.
The club will know more about the future of their grass racetrack following a working group's report to the Racing Minister in the next few months. In Omakau, the South today.
There is no sign of completion for an Opaho man digitising the history of the South in his basement, one film reel at a time. And the only reward semi-retired Maurice Hayward gets for his 20 hours of work a week is knowing important footage will live on for future generations.
Bringing the images of the past into the digital era. Dunedin man Maurice Hayward has spent the best part of the last 2 decades taking old film reels and restoring them as part of Dunedin's Film Heritage Trust.
Now these films, they last pretty well, but some of them don't, and it's a good idea to put them onto a digital format because they're much more permanent.
He's blown the dust off nearly 4,000 films and converted 6 terabytes of footage. His efforts have seen him win a Kiwibank Local Hero Award, but he says there's still a lot to do.
It's something I feel is important to do. There's very few people in New Zealand that are doing it, so a lot of history's being destroyed and lost.
The cine films are usually found in dusty garages across Otago and Southland, with some dating back to the 1930s.
I think there's still thousands of them around Otago, Southland, and we are continually asking people, and the next thing somebody rings up and says, I found 50 films, will you do them for me?
Hayward has built his experience over the years in various electrical and engineering roles, expertise that's seen him able to rig up and operate his own workshop.
There's nothing in books or anything like this about how you do old films, and it's all from experience, trying things out and so on.
In recent years, he's taken on the mammoth task of digitising a collection of about 500 films for the Hocken Library. And he's also agreed to restore some of the library's old tapes and eventually plans to give the footage to museums across the south. In Dunedin, for the South Today.
A 15-year labour of love is going viral for a pair of Catlins crib owners thanks to the power of the internet. Local man Wayne Allen's interest was piqued when he learned of forgotten waterfalls alongside tourist drawcards such as the Purakanui and McLean Falls. When he learned of a 20-metre cataract just south of his Papatowai crib, he set out with his friend Peter Hill to find it. The initial search for the falls took them 2.5 hours. With permission from the Department of Conservation, the pair embarked upon a 15-year project to build a track to the falls. The 40-minute return trail has been accessible for a few years, but recent promotion on camping apps is allowing a growing crowd of visitors to enjoy the walk. That's all for Southern Newsweek. Head online and check us out on Facebook or keep up with Southern News via our website, channel39.co.nz. I'm Sophie Morris. Thanks for watching.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.